Our speaker today is Charlotte LeRoy. Our special guests include Charlotte's parents, Mary Margaret and Reese LeRoy, her grandparents, Lamar and Barbara LeRoy, her work mom, Brenda Shannon, a few of her friends, Olga Pizarski, Charity Santiago, Chip Kirksey, Caroline Smith, Danny Stevens, Maggie Walker-Betcho. Please join me in welcoming them. Charlotte's been a student prep since the 4th grade. She's been the class president for all 4 years of high school, and she's also the NHS president. She's participated in many seasons of athletics, especially track and field and volleyball. In volleyball, she was a captain this past season, selected as an all-region player. She also sings in the chorus. She participates on Prep's literary team. Last year, she was region champion and state runner-up for her personal narrative essay. Charlotte also works 2 jobs outside of school, at Friedman's Jewelers and at French Market Grow West. Clearly, Charlotte has a high capacity for work and service, and in all her efforts, she displays an unyielding pursuit of excellence. Next year, she hopes to study international affairs and economics at a lucky college to be decided. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlotte LeRoy.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, so much for that introduction. But not just that introduction. The past 3 years as my advisor, you have been my champion, my cheerleader, and my advocate. So thank you very much for that experience. Now, as Mr. Schaefer said, I'm Charlotte. And for those of you who don't know me, I love writing more than life. So I've set this up very similarly to an essay. At first, we're going to have a few moving pieces, and then at the end, we'll bring them all together. All right. When I was in 4th grade, I miraculously stumbled upon the secret to success. It was quite simple. Find something you wanted to do, stick to it, and inevitably succeed. Now, I was oblivious to the fact that this was a radical oversimplification, and thus I proceeded to step 1. Pick something. Now, weeks after I made this life-altering discovery, I had a minor knee surgery, and I was under anesthesia. The anesthesiologist on my case was a confident, intelligent woman whom I immediately deemed my favorite doctor. Now, I quoted her salary, and the 6-figure result solidified my choice. I would become an anesthesiologist. In my infinite wisdom as a 10-year-old, I felt comfort in the fact that I had found my life calling, and I began to gear my future towards medicine. Now I will tell you why, had I continued down this track, I would have failed. For the next few minutes, we're going to put that anecdote to the side, and we're going to talk about something I like to call the blueprints. Now, there are many companies that are worthy of this title, but we're going to focus on 2 that we are all intimately familiar with, Nike and Apple. Let's start with Nike. It was founded in 1964, and a coach and athlete for track would sell tennis shoes out of a minivan at track meets. Now, however, it is the foremost athletic wear company in the world, valued at over $188 billion. Its closest competitor, Adidas, is valued at only $30 billion. Now, I understand that the phrase only X billion dollars is a tad bit oxymoronic, but just to grasp how immense this deficit is, if I were to make $1 every second for every day, it would take me 1,046 years to equate to Adidas's net worth. For Nike, however, it would take 5,961 years. Adidas was founded first, it had more capital to begin with, so why is Nike so far ahead today? We'll answer that in a minute. Apple, like Nike, is the forerunner of its field enormously. I'm comfortable in asserting that about 97% of us in this room have an iPhone. Why though? They're more expensive, they require their own chargers, and Apple has so frustratingly mastered the term planned obsolescence. Many experts argue that in terms of technological function and sophistication, they're about on par with everyone else today. And yet it absolutely dominates commercial technology. These companies, Nike and Apple, they differ in employee structure, are in completely different markets, and have different consumer interests, but they have the same core reason for their incredible success. Now, to offer some basic background, when we're starting a company, we want to focus on 3 major things. Market conditions, is this the right time to start my business? qualified workers? Do I have the right employees with the right expertise and experience to help me foster this business? And capital. Do I have the financial stability, or do I have access to investors that have the financial stability to help me grow? Now, when a business fails, they typically cite a lack of one of these three things as to why they have failed. And on the surface, this is true. If you have no investors and no capital, you're very unlikely to succeed. But there are other factors to consider. This is a model known as the theory of diffusion of innovation. It was created by E.M. Rogers, and it explains why, when people are introduced to new concepts or technologies, we either embrace them or reject them. Now, our first section, that 2.5%, these are the innovators. There are risk takers, our entrepreneurs. These are the people that are willing to put it all on the line. Next, we have our early adopters. This 13.5% is going to end up being our key. But they're the people who watch our risk takers to see who they believe in. Then we move on to our early majority. They slowly notice popularity, the product spreading, and like the late majority, they'll buy in. Finally, we have our laggards. These are the people whose grandparents, whose grandchildren had to buy them an iPhone only because the rotary phone they were using no longer worked. This 13.5% here, this is gonna be the key. It closes the gap between the risk takers and the majority. So how do we close it? Simon Sinek has a theory. Sinek is an absolutely brilliant public speaker and author who received a degree in cultural anthropology from Brandeis. He's published 5 books, my favorite of which is Start With Why. It's full of incredible stories and research and ideas, but if I had to synthesize his thoughts, and I do, I would give you the golden circle. Sinek created this model to explain how businesses typically start and how they should start. Typically, they'll start with what? Their product, service, etc. They'll move on to the how, manufacturing costs, investment, marketing, and then they'll get to the why. This is where they start to struggle. Earlier, when we discussed Apple and Nike, we left without an answer to how, despite the apparent differences, the two companies, they're actually quite similar. It's because, as Sinek tells us, they approached the golden circle backwards. They started with why. Apple didn't bore their consumers with in-depth explanations on why their product functioned or how it was coded. They presented an ideology. Think different. People heard this and they wanted to take part in it. They wanted to be a part of the group that called themselves pioneers and trailblazers, and it worked. Nike did the same thing. Their advertisements didn't revolve around the specifications of their products. They instead developed a cult following based on their 1988 campaign, Just Do It. People bought Nikes because they related on a core level to the urge of spontaneity and courage. These purchases were nearly a tangible demonstration of their commitment to that mentality. These companies succeeded because they started with why. Now, Sinek moves even further and he applies the golden circle to historical figures and social movements. Could you do me a favor? Please raise your hand if you know who the Wright brothers are. So I can't actually see you, but we're gonna assume that a lot of you raised your hand. Now put your hands down, and if you know who Samuel Pierpont Langley is, would you please raise your hand? Thank you. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Wright brothers were the first to achieve powered manned flight, and at the time they accomplished this feat, there was a race afoot, very similar to the race to get to the moon. Many people around the world were working intensely to be the first, and Samuel Langley was one of those people. I want you to think back to those 3 things that we talked about earlier: capital, market conditions, qualified employees, and we're going to apply them to this scenario. Langley was funded by the United States War Department. He was intricately connected with Harvard and was appointed the secretary of the Smithsonian, and the worldwide race to be first meant that the market conditions were pristine. He was the top pick to win the race. The New York Times even had reporters following him around waiting for him to break the news that he had done it. And yet he failed, despite this perfect formula. The Wright brothers, on the other hand, they had no capital except from that of their bike shop. Their colleagues and employees were themselves, and neither of them had a college education. Yet it was them who succeeded. They succeeded because they pursued this feat not for fame, but out of curiosity and passion for technological innovation. They started with why. It took a few days for the word to spread, since they had no reporters following them around. But when Langley found out, he quit. That speaks volumes about his motivations. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He is arguably one of the most influential orators of our time. Yes, he was a gifted public speaker and an intelligent young black man in the wake of the civil rights movement, but there were also many other people who fit this description. So why him? It's because he understood fundamentally that people are moved and compelled by ideologies, not plans and statistics. Simon Sinek said, Martin Luther King had a dream, not a plan. People are intrinsically motivated by this three-letter word, why. And this isn't just backed by anecdotal evidence or social experiments, it's biologically ingrained in us. You see, our brains at the very center have this beautiful section called the limbic system. It's responsible for our behavior, our decision-making. This is where our fight or flight instincts stem from. No matter how low your EQ is, at one point or another, you found yourself unable to explain your decision, stuck with phrases like, it just doesn't feel right. I have this gut feeling. Unfortunately, our limbic system isn't responsible for our language, so we get stuck with these words. But when we utilize the golden circle, we communicate directly with our limbic system. Now, I want to pull this theory of why beyond business models or success stories from history. I want to apply it to every major decision in our lives. I think so often, especially at a private school, we as students have a very insular view on success. We are so tempted to make decisions based on superficial statistics. When we hear about a college or a university, we Google their acceptance rate. We join thoughts and we join clubs thoughtlessly so that we may slap them on our application. We pursue or don't pursue careers based on the salary, the notoriety, what prefix it gives our last names. We push our passions to the back burner and dub them hobbies so that people may be impressed with our life plan. That's what I did. I decided that I wanted to be a doctor because it offered financial stability and prestige. I became infatuated with that white coat because to me it was a mark of success. But I realized that I would fail. I hate science. I hate it. I believe in it. I use it every day, but I hate it. It's not what I love. Now, please don't get me wrong. Money and stability, these are not easy things. They're not. In fact, I quite enjoy having money if you kindly turn your attention to the screen. But there are many ways to achieve these things and pursue your passions simultaneously. I just want to take a minute before we conclude here and thank all of my guests for being here today. Whether you like to admit it or not, you have played a key role in forming who I am, and I hope you're pleased with the result. But specifically, my parents and my grandparents for helping me to understand that I'm here to pursue an education so that I can do what I want in the future, and for not pushing me to do something simply because it would make money or bring prestige. You've always been incredibly supportive of me, so thank you very much for all the sacrifices that you've made to get me here. To my sisters, Emma, Catherine, and Lily, I miss you dearly. Thank you for being my humblest defenders and my fiercest advocates. I really hope you watch this because otherwise this would be awkward. Now, traditionally, my final words in these 10 minutes should be a message to the senior class, but I hope that you would instead take the entire contents of my speech and apply them to your whole life. Apply them to your college decisions, to your majors, to any other clubs or organizations that you might join. Pursue what you're passionate about and let the other things follow. Now, I came across a line in a poem one day by an author named Charles Bukowski, and I think it really summarizes what I'm trying to say. He wrote, "Either peace or happiness, let it enfold you." I encourage you to seek these things, and let monetary stability or notoriety, whatever you're seeking, be a byproduct of that. Be creative and passionate in your pursuits. Remember, it's not what you do, it's why you do it. Thank you.